We don't want any user to be able to create posts, but only authenticated users. But before we write tests for that, what we're going to do is actually write some validation tests for creating posts. So we are going to be writing tests to make sure that a title must be required to create a post and a body must also be required. So let's go ahead and create that. Public function test title is required to create post. So how are we going to do this? We are going to send a request to that endpoint, but we are not going to pass in a title. So we're going to set the title to null. And then we are going to assert that the session has errors, and one of those errors is going to be title, right? So in our test response.php, we have this assert session has errors, because remember, if we have a validation fail in Laravel, it's going to redirect the user back automatically, and it's going to set some session keys containing the validation errors that we have. So let's go ahead and assert this. So we're going to say response assert session has errors, and we're going to pass in the title as a key. Okay, so if we make a request to that endpoint without the title, it should give us an error in the session. So let's run this test independently by giving it a group, and it's going to be title required is the name of our group. Let's head over to our terminal, run that with title required as the group, and we have an error saying integrity constraint violation, not null constraint failed on post.title. Okay, so this is coming from our database saying that the post is not supposed to be null, but then we gave it null. So what we're going to do is actually mute that error a little bit by going to our create post table, and then we're going to mute that error by making this nullable, and this is just going to help us actually drive our validation. So let's run that again. And then we have session is missing expected key errors, because if we head over to our test response, first of all, Laravel checks if there's a key for errors, and then it starts checking if the error has the title key, right? And so that's because we don't even have any validation set up. So let's head over to our post controller, and here we're going to validate the data that is being passed in. So this validate, we're going to take in the session, and we're going to pass in an array of validation rows. So first of all, I'm just going to create a variable here for our session, and then our request validation rows are title must be required. Okay, so now that we have this validation rule for our title, let's run our test again. And we have a validation exception that is thrown, and that validation exception is thrown because in our handler we are throwing the exception. Let's uncomment it a little bit and check out that. And obviously we have a successful test. Now let's write exactly the same test for our body in our create post test. So I'm just going to duplicate all of this, and here is going to be body required for the group name, and I'm just going to create this to body is required to create post, and here we're going to have new post title, and this time around the body is going to be null, and we're going to assert that the session has body. Awesome. So let's run that test, and this is just going to be body required. Failed asserting that it has key errors because the validation is just passing. So we'll set that body to required, run that again, and we have a successful test. But let's not forget, in our create post table, we want to remove this nullable flag that we used to test to make sure that our test gave us expected errors. So everything works perfectly. Let's run everything in our test suite, and we have all successful responses.